I never planned on becoming a nanny. I had a degree in media studies, a stack of rejection emails, and a slowly dying laptop that whirred like a lawnmower every time I opened LinkedIn. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just something that would keep me afloat until I figured out my life. But then came the listing. Part-time nanny needed for a 5-year-old boy. Weekdays. Decent pay. Must be reliable. Must like dinosaurs. That last part got me. I almost didn't apply. The ad was buried in a neighborhood Facebook group. The kind people mostly use to complain about fireworks and slow mail. But I clicked, sent a message, and the next day I got a reply. Can you come by for a short chat? 4 p.m. tomorrow, address attached. I showed up with no expectations, wearing a thrifted button-up and my only clean jeans. It was a nice house. Simple, a little scuffed at the edges with toys visible through the living room window. I rang the doorbell and braced for a frazzled mom. Instead, he answered. At first, I thought I had the wrong house. He looked too young, too casual. Wavy brown hair, a bit of stubble, dark eyes that were warm but tired. He had this natural confidence about him, the kind that said I don't do small talk if I don't have to. You're Jamie? He asked, stepping aside to let me in. Yeah, I said. You must be Eli, he said. I'm the dad. Right, the dad. The divorced dad, I would later find out. He led me to the kitchen where his son Milo was sitting on the counter, legs swinging, holding a toy T-Rex in one hand and what looked like an Oreo in the other. Milo, this is Jamie, Eli said. He might be hanging out with you after school. Milo gave me a long look, then made the dinosaur roar. Hi, he said, Oreo crumbs everywhere. And just like that, I was in. I started the following Monday. Eli worked from home most days. Something with design or marketing, I never fully got it. But his schedule was packed with Zoom meetings and client calls. And he needed someone to keep Milo busy after daycare until dinner. Our routine was simple. Pick up at 3, snacks and cartoons by 3:30, playtime or park depending on the weather, and then winding down around 5. Eli would usually appear by 6 to take over. He wasn't the hovering type, but he wasn't distant either. He was involved in a quiet, competent way. Milo adored him, and it was easy to see why. For the first couple of weeks, I didn't think much about him. Sure, he was attractive. Hot, if we're being honest. But I wasn't there for that. I kept things professional. Friendly, warm, but professional. But then things started to shift. It wasn't anything big, just the way he'd linger in the kitchen a little longer when I made coffee. The way we started talking more about music, books, the ridiculous things Milo said. One afternoon, after Milo had passed out mid-episode of Paw Patrol, Eli sat down next to me on the couch and said, You're good with him. I shrugged, brushing a Cheerio off my jeans. He makes it easy. Eli smiled, and it was softer than usual. It's been a weird year. I was worried he wasn't adjusting well. You're doing great, I said before I could stop myself. He's a happy kid. That's all you. Eli didn't reply right away. He just looked at me for a second, and there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite read. Something that made my pulse pick up just a little. That was the first time I noticed it, the tension, like a wire pulled just tight enough to hum. After that, things got complicated in the quietest ways. We started having late chats in the kitchen while Milo slept. We laughed more. Shared stories. There were nights I'd linger on the porch while Eli walked me out, the air thick with something unspoken. And then came the weekend. Eli had a last-minute trip. His ex bailed on plans and he needed to be in a meeting out of town. He asked if I could stay the weekend, just Friday to Sunday. I'll pay extra, obviously, he said, sounding sheepish. I agreed. Not because of the money. The weekend was surprisingly easy. Milo was an angel, and Eli kept checking in with texts that made me smile more than they should have. On Sunday afternoon, after Eli got back, we sat on the back steps while Milo napped. Thanks again, he said. You saved me. No problem, I said, sipping a lemonade. I mean, it's not like I had plans. My social life's pretty tragic, Eli laughed. Yeah? Doesn't seem like it should be. I looked at him. Why not? He shrugged. You're good company. There was a pause, one of those quiet ones that stretch just long enough to make your skin buzz. He was sitting close, and I could feel the warmth of him. His arm brushed mine as he set his drink down, and neither of us moved. I should have said something, changed the subject, looked away. But I didn't, and neither did he. The moment hung there, teetering between something and nothing. His arm was still against mine, and I could feel the steady warmth of him like it meant more than it should have. My throat felt dry. I should have made a joke, shifted away, said, "Cool backyard," or so anyway, but I didn't. Instead, Eli turned to look at me, and I swear something shifted in his eyes, like whatever had been buried under his usual calm finally reached the surface. His lips parted like he was about to speak, but then the screen door creaked open. Milo stood there, half asleep, rubbing one eye with the back of his hand. "Dad," he mumbled, "I want apple juice." Eli stood quickly, ruffling Milo's hair as he passed. "Yeah, bud. Let's get you sorted." And just like that, the moment vanished. I watched them from the steps, Eli guiding Milo to the kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world. It was. He was a great dad. Calm, patient, not trying to be impressive, just present. Watching him with Milo made it worse, honestly. Like this wasn't just a crush. It was something knotted deeper than that. I left a little later than usual that night. The sun had already dipped low, the porch lights humming above the driveway. Eli walked me out, hands stuffed into the pockets of his hoodie. "Thanks again," he said. "For the whole weekend. I owe you." "You don't," I said. "It was good, honestly." He nodded. "Still, if you ever want a day off or need help with anything, I'll let you know." I cut in, smiling. "Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere." His eyes flicked up at that, meeting mine. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but all he said was, "Good night, Jamie." "Night," I said, stepping backward toward my car. I felt his eyes on me the whole way down the drive. After that weekend, things didn't return to normal. Not exactly. It was small stuff at first. More lingering eye contact, more coffee breaks where he'd find a reason to sit at the kitchen table and talk to me while I helped Milo with his puzzles. He started noticing things about me. Little things, like how I took my tea, or the way I muttered to myself when I was concentrating. "You talk to your socks when you fold them," he said one afternoon, grinning. I laughed, flustered. "Do not." "You do," he said. "It's weirdly charming." Weirdly charming. What the hell was I supposed to do with that? Milo, of course, was oblivious to all of it. He loved having me around, and we had a rhythm by now. He'd tell me his latest dinosaur facts, I'd pretend to be shocked, and we'd build entire prehistoric worlds out of blocks. I was starting to feel like part of their little unit, which is exactly what made it so risky. I didn't want to screw it up. This wasn't some Tinder thing where if it got awkward, you could just block each other. This was his kid, his home, his life. And then Thursday happened. Eli had a rough day. Milo told me his dad had yelled at the printer and said a bad word that started with F and ended with stupid. I brought Eli a coffee around 4, figuring it might help. "Thanks," he said, rubbing his eyes as I handed it over. "You look like you aged a decade since this morning." He gave me a weak smile. "Feel like it. Some days just hit different." We stood there in the kitchen, both leaning against opposite counters. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It had turned into something else, an undercurrent. I watched him sip the coffee, his hair messier than usual, shirt wrinkled. He looked exhausted. And stupidly good. "I don't know how you do it," I said, not thinking. He looked up. "Do what?" "All of it. Work, being a dad, keeping it together." Eli gave a tired chuckle. "I don't. I drop the ball all the time. I just try not to let him see it." "He thinks you're a superhero," I said. He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. "And what about you?" "What about me? Do you think I've got it all together?" I didn't answer right away. "I think," I paused, voice lower, "you make it look easier than it probably is." There was a beat. A full, silent moment where the kitchen felt too still. Eli set his coffee down and pushed off the counter. And then he crossed the room. Slow. Steady. His eyes never left mine. When he stopped, he was close. Closer than usual. That line we hadn't crossed was right there, inches from my toes. "You're not just good with Milo," he said quietly. You've made this house feel easier, lighter." My throat tightened. "I didn't plan this," I said, not even sure what I meant. "I know," he said. "Me neither." His hand hovered near my arm. He didn't touch me. Not yet. I didn't know what to say. But I knew I wasn't stepping back. And maybe that was the answer he needed. He didn't kiss me. I thought maybe he would. The moment was right there, practically holding its breath. But instead, Eli's hand finally touched my arm gently, just enough to make my skin feel too warm. "I shouldn't," he said, voice barely audible. And I wasn't sure if he meant shouldn't touch me, shouldn't be this close, or shouldn't feel what he clearly did. "You haven't done anything," I said, quieter than I meant. His fingers lingered. "Not yet." That last part stuck with me long after I left. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying everything. His voice, the look in his eyes, the way I didn't want him to pull back. It wasn't just a spark. It was something that felt like it had been simmering under the surface for weeks. Still, the next morning, I walked into the house like everything was normal, because it had to be. Milo greeted me in a T-Rex costume, roaring with full commitment. I laughed, bent down, and played along, doing the dramatic, "Oh no, a dinosaur" routine that always cracked him up. Eli was in the kitchen, dressed for a client call in a navy button-up and black slacks, looking far too put together for someone who had almost ruined me with a stare less than 12 hours ago. He nodded when I came in. "Morning, morning," I replied, carefully neutral. Our eyes met briefly, just long enough to acknowledge it all without actually acknowledging it. There was an understanding in that glance. We were putting it on pause. For now. That whole day felt like being stuck in a weird, slow-motion dream. I tried to stay focused on Milo. He was especially hyper, which helped. But every time Eli walked by or entered the room, my awareness flickered like a sensor light. I caught him watching us through the kitchen doorway once, arms folded, a soft look on his face. It wasn't about me, not really. It was the way he looked when he was watching Milo be happy. But then I realized he was watching both of us. That night, as I was packing up to leave, Eli met me by the door. "You heading out?" "Yeah," I said, slipping on my jacket. There was a pause. One of those now familiar ones that stretched longer than it should have. "Listen," he started, then ran a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about yesterday." I looked up at him. "Me too." He nodded slowly. "I don't want to mess anything up. Not for Milo. Not for you." I nodded. "I get that. But I also don't want to ignore it like it didn't happen." That part caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting him to say it out loud. "Same," I said. "I just don't know what to do about it." Eli stepped closer, and this time, there wasn't the hesitance from before. His voice was lower now, more certain. "I like you, Jamie, not just because you're great with Milo. I like you." My stomach flipped. "You have a lot going on," I said carefully. "And I'm technically your employee." "You're not just that," he cut in. "Not anymore. You know that." I swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to figure this out. If you're open to that." Slowly, carefully. It was strange. How steady he made it all sound. Like he wasn't trying to sweep me off my feet or rush anything. Just figure it out. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm open." And for the first time, his shoulders relaxed. He didn't touch me again that night. No dramatic kiss, no sweeping gesture. Just that quiet agreement hanging in the air between us. But something had changed. And we both felt it. The next week blurred by in a mess of normal and not so normal. Milo's schedule didn't change, and neither did mine. But everything between me and Eli had this new energy. More smiles. More late-night kitchen conversations. More quiet acknowledgments of something shifting between us. There were moments that made it harder to keep the line. Like Tuesday, when he walked in after a workout, sweaty, in a tank top, clearly not meaning to weaponize that. Or Thursday, when we accidentally brushed hands reaching for the same toy in Milo's pile, and neither of us moved right away. But we kept it together. Barely. Then came Friday night. Eli had invited me to stay for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pizza and a movie with Milo. He said it was casual. But the way he looked at me when I arrived said otherwise. Dinner was easy. Milo was his usual chaotic self, insisting we watch The Land Before Time for the 100th time. After he passed out on the couch with pizza sauce on his cheek, Eli carried him to bed and came back to find me halfway through cleaning up the dishes. "You don't have to do that," he said, leaning on the counter. I shrugged. "Habit." He walked over, grabbed a towel, and started drying the plates I handed him. The silence between us was comfortable, familiar, but it buzzed. "You know," he said after a while, "I keep waiting for this to get weird." I glanced over at him. "And? It's not. That's what's weird," I smiled. "Yeah, I know what you mean." The last plate was done. He tossed the towel aside, then leaned back against the counter, watching me. His eyes were darker than usual. Serious. "I want to kiss you," he said, so plainly it made me forget how to breathe. I froze for a second, heart thudding. "Then why haven't you?" He stepped forward. One step, then another, and this time there was no hesitation. His hand touched my face, warm and certain. His thumb brushed my cheek, and I leaned in without thinking. The kiss was slow, like he was checking first, making sure I was still there, still okay with it. I was. And when he finally pulled back, just enough to look at me, he whispered, "Took me too long." After the kiss, we just stood there in the kitchen, not talking, not moving much, barely breathing. His hand stayed on my face, and mine settled on his chest without thinking. It was steady under my palm, warm, real. I didn't want to ruin it by speaking too soon. But eventually, reality started creeping back in, the hum of the fridge, the half-empty pizza box on the counter, the fact that his kid was sleeping upstairs and I was still technically his nanny. Eli exhaled quietly. "This probably complicates everything." I nodded. "Yeah." He didn't move away. "I don't regret it," he added. "I didn't either." Still, I wasn't sure what came next. Was I supposed to say goodnight and pretend nothing happened? Was I supposed to stay? Did he want me to? I opened my mouth to say something, but he beat me to it. "Can you stay a little longer?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I can do that." He led us to the living room. We sat down on the couch, this time without a movie, without distractions. Just two people in the soft quiet of a home at night, both trying to process something that felt like a turning point. We didn't make out. We didn't even touch beyond that first kiss. But we talked. About everything. He told me about the divorce. How it wasn't messy, just sad. How they tried to stay friends. How it didn't work. How being a full-time dad scared him more than he ever admitted. And how he hadn't even considered dating again. Not seriously. Not until this. I told him about how I'd ended up in this job. How I thought it'd be temporary. How it had started to feel less like work and more like something else. "You've been in this house every day for weeks," he said, looking at me. "It's weird how fast that becomes normal. Good." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Around midnight, I stood up reluctantly. I should go. He walked me to the door again. This time, when he kissed me, it was softer, slower. A promise, not a question. "Text me when you get home," he said. I nodded. "You know I will." After that night, everything was different. Not in a dramatic way. Not with fireworks or some grand confession. It was subtle. Shifts in the way we moved around each other. In the way our eyes found each other a little more often. But we were careful. Milo didn't know, and we wanted to keep it that way. For now. Eli was adamant about that. He didn't want to confuse him. or make anything harder than it had to be. So during the day, it was business as usual. But after Milo's bedtime, it was us. Sometimes just talking, sometimes sitting close on the couch, our legs brushing. And sometimes, when the world felt a little quieter, a little more ours, we'd kiss in the kitchen with the lights dimmed and the door locked. It was strange, being in this half-hidden version of a relationship. But it didn't feel wrong. It felt good, grounded, like we were building something slowly, not rushing into a mess, until the night his ex showed up. It was a Thursday. Cloudy. Milo was moody after daycare, so we skipped the park and did puzzles inside instead. I was helping him finish a T-Rex when the doorbell rang. Eli answered it, and I didn't think much of it until I heard her voice. I knew who it was immediately. Her tone was light but clipped, a little too cheerful. I stayed in the living room, unsure if I should leave or stay put. Milo didn't seem to notice. He was too busy smashing toy cars into the edge of the coffee table. Eli's voice was lower, harder to hear, but I could tell from his posture that it wasn't a friendly visit. Eventually, she stepped into the living room. Blonde. Expensive sunglasses. Nails painted the kind of red that says I don't lose. "Oh," she said, looking at me. "You must be the nanny." I stood. "Yeah, Jamie." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Right." Eli came in behind her, his jaw tight. "He's just wrapping up with Milo," he said to her. "You said you needed to talk?" "In private, if that's okay," she said, eyes still on me. I gave Eli a quick glance. He nodded slightly. "We'll be in the office." They left, and I sat back down on the rug with Milo, who was now balancing a Hot Wheels car on top of a brontosaurus. "She's nice," he said casually. I tried to smile. "She is." But I felt off. The office door was closed. I couldn't hear anything, but when they finally came out 20 minutes later, Eli looked tired. And she looked like she'd won something. She left without another word to me. Eli walked me out later, after Milo had gone to bed. The air was heavier than usual. "Everything okay?" I asked. "She wants to change the custody schedule," he said. "Wants to take him to her parents' place for a few weeks this summer." I nodded, trying to hide the disappointment that crept in. It wasn't my place. But the idea of not seeing Milo or him for that long hit harder than I expected. "She also asked about you," he added. That made me pause. "Yeah?" "She noticed," he said. "Us." I swallowed. "What did you say?" "That it's none of her business." He looked at me then, not with panic or regret, just honestly. "She doesn't get to decide what's right for me anymore." I stepped closer. "And what is right for you?" He didn't hesitate. "You." The words hung in the air between us. "You." Soft but solid, like they were meant to be said. Like they weren't just a passing thought or a whim, but something Eli had turned over in his mind, quietly, for days. He wasn't a guy who said things he didn't mean. And that made it worse. Or better. I didn't know anymore. I looked at him, really looked at him, and all I could think was, how the hell did I end up here? Standing in the doorway of a house I hadn't even known a month ago, with a guy I'd only meant to work for, and now I was wondering what it'd feel like to stay. I didn't say anything. I just stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It wasn't a moment we stumbled into. It was slow, steady, real. His hand slid up the side of my neck, thumb grazing just under my jaw, and it was the kind of kiss that made everything else go quiet. No thoughts, no worries. Just the thrum of his heartbeat against mine, the solid warmth of his body, and the silent, terrifying realization that I was already way too far in to turn back. We didn't sleep together that night. Not in the way that word usually means. Instead, we lay on the couch after, curled under a blanket, Milo's half-finished dinosaur puzzle still on the table. Eli rested his head back, eyes closed, one hand loosely tangled with mine. It felt weirdly intimate, more than if we'd slept together. It felt like trust. "I haven't felt like this in a long time," he said quietly. I glanced over. "Like what?" "Comfortable." That hit me harder than it should have. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Things didn't get easier, but they got clearer. We kept things quiet between us and the silence. We didn't talk labels. We didn't make plans. But there was a rhythm now, one I fell into faster than I thought possible. Dinner, bath time, cartoons. Then later, soft touches in the hallway when Milo was asleep, whispered conversations in the dark, kisses in the laundry room when I pretended to look for towels. It felt normal. Dangerous, maybe, but also right. Until one night when Milo caught me dozing on the couch after dinner. Eli was upstairs, finishing a call. I'd let Milo stay up a little later because it was Friday, and honestly, I'd had one too many slices of pizza. He climbed up next to me and curled into my side like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Are you staying forever?" he asked, voice muffled against my shirt. I froze. I glanced at the staircase. "Why do you ask?" Milo shrugged. "You're always here. I like when you're here. Daddy smiles more." That part almost broke me. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't want to say yes and make a promise I couldn't keep. And I didn't want to say no and break his heart before anything had even begun. So I said the only thing I could. "I like being here too." He nodded, satisfied, and yawned against me. By the time Eli came down, Milo was asleep on my chest, and I was barely holding it together. Eli knelt beside us, brushing Milo's hair gently. Our eyes met, and I could see it. He'd heard. Or maybe he hadn't. But he knew. That moment did something to both of us, because Milo wasn't just a kid I watched anymore. He was someone I cared about. And that made all of this real. Complicated, but real. A few nights later, it finally happened. It was quiet. Milo was at his mom's for the weekend, and Eli and I had the house to ourselves. We'd made dinner together, half-laughed through a failed attempt at risotto, and ended up eating pasta out of mismatched bowls on the couch. When we kissed that night, there was no hesitation, no guilt. We stumbled upstairs, not in a rush, but with intent. Like we both knew we'd been circling this for weeks, like the waiting was over. In his room, it was slow, careful, every movement deliberate, every touch asking permission before taking. His hands on me were warm and steady, and when our clothes finally came off, there was nothing rushed or frantic, just the quiet press of skin against skin and the weight of everything we weren't saying out loud. It wasn't just some closeness, it was something else. After, we lay tangled in the sheets, his arm draped over me, our breaths slowly sinking in the dark. I stared at the ceiling and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. And maybe a little fear, because I knew I wasn't just falling for him, I already had. The next morning was strangely perfect. I woke up to sunlight bleeding in through the blinds, the soft scent of coffee drifting up the hallway. For a split second, I forgot where I was. But then I turned over and saw the crumpled side of the bed where Eli had been, and everything came back in a slow, warm rush. I pulled on a t-shirt, his, and padded barefoot down the hall to the kitchen. He was there, of course, barefoot, hair tousled, shirt clinging to his back as he poured coffee into two mismatched mugs like he'd done it 100 times before. "Morning," he said without turning around, like he already knew I was there. "Hey," I replied, voice still scratchy from sleep. He handed me a mug and leaned against the counter beside me. For a few moments, we just sipped in silence. No awkwardness. No tiptoeing around what had happened. It was just easy. Comfortable. That was the scariest part. "How you feeling?" he asked, side-eyeing me over his mug. "About what?" "Last night. This?" he said, motioning vaguely between us. I looked at him, took a slow breath, and said, "Honestly? Better than I thought I'd feel." Eli smiled, a little crooked. "Me too." I leaned my shoulder into his. "We're not in trouble, are we?" he snorted. "Not unless you snore. Then we're screwed." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop the grin spreading across my face. But that moment, that whole quiet, ordinary morning, made it hit me. This wasn't casual. Not anymore. And the closer we got, the more real it all became. By midweek, we were back in routine. Milo was home again, the house was full of dinosaur toys, and life moved forward like it hadn't shifted on its axis just a few nights before. But it had. There were subtle differences now. The way Eli would brush past me in the kitchen, fingertips grazing my hip like it meant nothing. The way we'd exchanged looks across the room while Milo told a story, like we had our own silent dialogue. We didn't tell Milo anything. Not yet. We agreed it had to stay quiet. He was too young and too sensitive to changes in his world. We wanted to be sure of us before bringing him into it. But secrecy had its limits, especially when we started slipping. One night, after we'd both put Milo to bed, Eli walked me to the door like usual. But instead of just saying goodnight, he kissed me, soft, slow, but deep enough that it turned my brain to static. That would have been fine if Milo hadn't padded down the stairs, rubbing his eyes mid-kiss. "Dad?" We broke apart instantly, like teenagers caught making out in a parked car. Eli turned around. "Hey, bud, what's up?" "I had a bad dream," Milo mumbled, dragging his dinosaur plush behind him. I stepped back, trying to look as casual as possible. "I'll let you handle that. Night, Milo." He waved sleepily as Eli scooped him up and carried him back upstairs. I walked out into the cool night air, heart racing. We were playing with fire. The next day, things felt different. Not in a bad way, just heavier. Eli pulled me aside after lunch. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what Milo saw last night." "Yeah," I said slowly. "Me too." He looked serious. He didn't seem upset, but it's probably time we figure out how to handle this. Long term. My stomach twisted. "Are you saying you want to?" He held my gaze. "I'm saying I want this to last. Whatever this is. I don't want to pretend it's nothing." I didn't expect the relief that washed over me. It was like my chest had been tight for weeks, and I hadn't even noticed until it loosened. "I want that too," I said. "But we need to be smart about it, especially with Milo." He nodded. "I know, maybe not a big talk right away, but when it feels right, we bring him in. Slowly." "Agreed," I said, then smirked. "Also, maybe fewer kitchen makeout sessions while he's still awake." Eli laughed under his breath. "Noted." But life, as usual, had its own plans. The very next day, Milo asked the question we were least prepared for. We were at the park. He was climbing the little plastic rock wall while I waited nearby with a juice box in one hand and my phone in the other. He called down, breathless from the top. "Are you going to be my stepdad?" I choked so hard on the sip of water I'd just taken that I nearly coughed out a lung. "What?" I sputtered. He shrugged like it was nothing. "You're always here, and Daddy looks at you like Uncle Jake looks at his boyfriend." I didn't know whether to laugh or run for the hills. "Milo," I said slowly, "where'd you learn that word?" "I'm 6, he said, like I was the dumb one. "I watch stuff." Fair point. I was saved from answering by Eli, who showed up just then with his usual reusable coffee cup and a confused look on his face. "What'd I miss?" "Your son," I said, standing, "just asked if I was going to be his stepdad." Eli froze. "He what?" Milo just smiled. "You guys kiss when you think I'm not looking." Eli looked at me. I looked at him. And then we both burst out laughing. Because of course Milo noticed. Of course he did. We sat him down that evening. Nothing too serious, just honest. We told him that sometimes grown-ups really like each other, and sometimes that turns into more. And yes, Daddy and Jamie really like each other. Milo took it in stride, mostly because he was more interested in whether this meant he got 2 birthday cakes now. That night, when he went to bed, Eli turned to me on the couch and said, "Well, so much for slowly." I leaned into his side. "At least it's out in the open." He kissed my temple. "Yeah, feels better, doesn't it?" It did. And for the first time in a long time, everything finally felt like it was falling into place. It's been 3 months since that night at the park. 3 months of slow mornings, packed lunches, bedtime stories, and late-night kisses in the hallway. 3 months of figuring it out, one small, messy, beautiful step at a time. I still work part-time with Milo, though now it's less nanny and more bonus grown-up who knows how to make dino-shaped pancakes. Eli and I don't hide it anymore. We don't over-explain it either. To friends, to family, to Milo, it just is. And it's good. It's Sunday now. Milo sprawled across the living room floor, deeply invested in building a Lego volcano, and Eli's beside me on the couch, one arm draped behind me, his fingers absently running through my hair. It still catches me sometimes. How right this feels. Never meant to fall in love with the dad, but I did. And it turns out, he fell right back.